So that is the riff from Justin Timberlake's Cry Me a River. The track, of course, is produced by Timbaland, but apparently that keyboard figure was composed by Scott Storch. If you just want to play the riff, you can click the link below and download a free PDF of the score. Otherwise, I'll talk you through how to play it in the first half of this video. Then in the second half of the video, I'm going to analyze the chords, and that's going to be quite tricky if you're not used to harmonic analysis. So I imagine most people are going to want to skip that unless you're interested in producing your own tracks. So in terms of how to play the riff, let's start with the left hand. Left hand is basically 4 notes. You start with thumb on G sharp. This is just below middle C. Go down to 3rd on D sharp, then 2nd on E, and 4th on C sharp. And they're the 4 main notes in the left hand. You have a gap between each note. Then last thing in the left hand is that just before repeating it, you go back to G sharp via this D sharp again. So these are the 4 main notes. And then you get this really short D sharp before going back to the G sharp to repeat the whole thing. So the left hand is pretty straightforward. In the right hand, we have 4 chords. And I'm going to teach you them as chords, in other words, playing all 4 notes together to begin with, and then later on we'll arpeggiate them. But playing all of the notes together to start with, which is how I recommend practicing it, the first chord is this. So you have octave Bs, and then in the middle you have D sharp and G sharp. So 1, 2, 4, 5 in terms of the fingering. It'd be pretty hard to play it any other way. You can't really stretch that up there. That's the first chord. Then second chord is kind of, if it helps you remember it, in terms of the pattern of black and white notes, it's exactly the opposite of the first one. So this is 2 white notes with 2 black notes in between. Second chord is 2 black notes with 2 white notes in between. So here you have C sharp and A sharp at the outside, and then E and G in the middle. That's the second chord. And if you're finding these chords tricky to play, if you're not used to playing 4-note chords, I really recommend practicing just those first 2 chords to begin with. Practicing going from this chord to this chord. Again, pattern of white and black notes kind of inverts from the first to the second one. White, black, black, white, and then black, white, white, black. So they're the first 2 chords. Then the third chord is almost the same as the first chord, except instead of having 2nd on D sharp, we have 2nd on E. And if you happen to know your major triads, you might recognize that as an E major triad with the B repeated down an octave. Then the fourth chord is the same as the second chord. So you really have 3 chords to learn because the second one is the same as the fourth. It's the first chord, second chord, third chord, and then fourth chord. So once you've then nailed the right hand in terms of playing the chords all together, again, we're going to arpeggiate them later, put them together with those 4 bass notes we learned before. So again, for the time being, play all 5 notes together. That's the first chord. That's the second one. Sounds pretty dissonant. There's a pretty harsh clash between this D sharp in the left hand and the E in the right hand. That's not a mistake. It's what they're actually playing in the recording. That's the third chord. And this is the fourth one. So practice playing those 4 chords in sequence before you play the whole riff as it's played on the original recording. First chord, second chord, third is similar to the first, and then fourth in the right hand is the same as the first one, and it goes back to the beginning. Then you're ready to arpeggiate them and start to play the notes as they're played in the original recording. And there are a couple of important things to get right when arpeggiating the chords. And if you haven't come across that word before, arpeggiating a chord is just playing the notes of a chord one by one. So the first thing to get right is that you don't play the notes one after the other, you actually kind of play them cumulatively. In other words, once you've played the first one, you hold it while you play the second one, and then you hold those 2 as you play the third one. So you end up actually with all 5 notes together. It's the first thing to get right with these arpeggios. So again, instead of this, you're playing this. And then the second thing to get right is that once you've got all 5 notes together, you take all of them off at the same time. So off, 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 off. And then you get that quick D sharp before going back to the start. So the gaps in the riff is quite an important part of the sound. And once you have that right, you can then play it with a metronome. So the speed of the original recording is 75 BPM. So we'll play it in time with a metronome. So you're hitting the bass notes on the clicks, and then you want to hit the top note of each arpeggio on a click. Click, click, like that, click, click. So basically the bottom and top notes are coinciding with clicks. That's how you get it in time. So that is how to play the riff. I'm now going to analyze the chords. If you're not used to harmonic analysis, skip this. This is not the easiest piece to analyze if you're starting out. We're going to cover kind of tricky minor triads and things like flat 9 chords, which are pretty alien to a lot of people. So we have 4 chords basically, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll just analyze them one by one. First one is this. Well, first of all, let's get rid of the duplicate notes because these 2 notes, G sharp and B, are duplicated up here. So let's drop these and just analyze these 3. If we just look at these 3 notes, hopefully you can see that that is a G sharp minor triad. Maybe easier to visualize. If you picture a G minor triad, you might be more familiar with that. And then just take each note up a semitone, you get a G sharp minor triad. And then the third and fifth, sorry, the root and third are repeated up here. Root third, root third. So that's just G sharp minor. That one's really reasonably straightforward. The second one is quite a bit harder because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different notes. None of the notes are repeated. Unlike this one, where 2 of them are. Here, none of the notes are repeated. Well, let's analyze this step by step. Let's just start with this. This, if the chord was this would be a straight E flat major chord. But instead of having an E flat in the right hand, we have these 2 notes. So let's analyze how these 2 notes relate to the root of the chord. So this is the root or the octave. A tone below an octave is a 7th. So that D flat is a 7th. So this would be E flat 7. And then we also have this note. Well, again, going back to the fact that this is the root of the chord, a tone above the root of a chord would be a 9th. So a semitone above the root is a flat 9th. This E is a flat 9th on the chord. So basically we have an E flat major chord with a 7th and a flat 9. So that is E flat 7 flat 9. I have root 3rd 5th here, and then 7th and flat 9th on these 2 fingers in the right hand. So that's quite a complicated chord, especially for a pop track. The third chord is a lot more straightforward. This, as I pointed out earlier, is just an E major triad, and then we're just repeating the root and 5th at the bottom. It's kind of a root 5th root at the bottom, then a triad at the top. It's just E major. And then the 4th chord, well, the chord in the right hand is the same as the 2nd chord. So you might be tempted to think it's the same chord as this one. However, the bass note has changed. So this was E flat 7 flat 9, but now we have this. So there's no E flat in the chord anymore. So it's no longer any kind of E flat chord. And what this actually is a diminished 7th chord. So a diminished 7th chord, if you haven't come across them, is where you have 4 notes which are all a minor third apart. And a minor third means that the notes are 3 semitones apart. So if you start from the C sharp, go up 3 semitones, 1, 2, 3, gets you to there. Another 3 semitones, 1, 2, 3, gets you to there. And then another 3 semitones, 1, 2, 3, gets you to there. That gives you the 4th chord, and that C sharp is just repeated in the bass. So that is a C sharp diminished 7th. if you look at how that chord symbol is written in the score, it is actually written as G diminished 7th over C sharp. So because these 4 notes are equally spaced, they're all a minor third apart, it means that if you invert it, you just get E diminished 7th, G diminished 7th, B flat diminished 7th. And for really, really complicated reasons to do with classical music theory, I would say that this is G diminished 7th over C sharp. So it's actually an inversion of this chord. I won't get into why that is, it's super complicated. It's basically to do with the fact that this is quite a classical chord progression, and in classical music theory, a diminished 7th chord is chord 7-7. So it is a 7th chord built on the sharp 7th of a scale. So we are in G sharp minor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7th note of the scale would be an F sharp. This is now sharpened, and then we build to become G or F double sharp. And then we're building a diminished 7th chord on that G, and then putting this in the bass. Super complicated. Just ignore all of that if that confused you. Technically, I would say that's G diminished 7th over C sharp. But yeah, that's it. The important thing is that this is a diminished 7th chord. So G sharp minor, E flat 7 with a flat 9, or D sharp 7 with a flat 9, given that we're in G sharp minor, E major, and then C sharp diminished 7th. There you go. So, overanalyzed Justin Timberlake's Cry Me a River.